Alright, hopefully this generator doesn't blow the power out.
I know it's dark in here, but it feels dark in here. Like the energy is like bad or something. You know, I can't explain it.
The Medium is a heavily story-driven game by Bloober Team. Bloober Team is the Polish team behind Observer and Layers of Fear, and they've managed to gain a pretty strong reputation as being a competent indie developer. I loved Observer, and I think it's one of the best cyberpunk games ever made. Please watch my Observer video and like and subscribe, but only to this video. I don't want anyone subscribing to the rest of the channel. Based on Observer, I knew the Bloober Boys could deliver something good, and like everyone by now probably knows, I'm also a huge paranormal, ghost, and folklore nerd, so this game's entire premise and setting of you being a medium in a modern time period was a good draw for me. Everyone wants to talk to ghosts. Everyone wants to be Zach.
Do you think we caught two spirits having sex?
The Medium is a mechanically light experience, much in the same way that Observer was, only even more so. They even have an achievement making fun of themselves for it. And, as is always the case, anytime you have a mechanically light video game, you need to make up for it in your writing or in your artistic presentation in some way. Journey is mechanically light, but it do be looking pretty, eye emojis, so everyone loves it. There are a ton of walking simulators and visual novels that are also mechanically light, but tell stories that bring them praise. The Medium was ambitious enough to attempt to make up for this lack of gameplay by tackling both a compelling story and compelling artistic presentation. And it definitely succeeds in some ways and kind of misses the mark in others. Let's look at the game mechanically first, and then we can look at its more creative aspects. The Medium is more or less just a nice walk through some old school survival horror camera angles. You pick up some objects, you use your medium brain to get information from them. You solve various puzzles, find various keys, and occasionally you need to run from a demon. All of this sounds simple, and for the most part, it is. I'm not going to get very much about talking about this game's more minor mechanical aspects. Sometimes you pick up a can of cat food, and the cat on it looks like John Wayne Gacy. That's pretty exciting, I guess. The major mechanical gimmick of the Medium, and the one that I actually can get long-winded about, is its two-world system. There are plenty of games that feature two worlds. Ocarina of Time has the present and the future, Soul Reaver has the living world and the spirit world, Silent Hill has the real world and the chain link fence world. This is not a concept that's new to video games. The achievement of the Medium is that sometimes both of the worlds are on the screen at the same time, and you're interacting with both of them simultaneously, which, as far as I know, hasn't been done before in real time. There are also times where you are either in the material world or the ghost zone separately, which means there are two major opportunities for this game to experiment with different kinds of dual world game design. The first opportunity deals with manipulating the environment in one world and then moving into the other one to get results, and the second one deals with manipulating both worlds at the same time, which effectively allows Marianne, who is the player character, to be in two places at once. The first one I mentioned is easy enough to conceptualize and has been done a lot in different games. For example, there are several points in the Medium where Marianne can use mirrors to move back and forth between worlds to get out of sticky situations. But this type of environmental puzzle is never really used to its full potential. And this section of the game, where you move a mirror around in this dollhouse to affect where the real mirror takes you, is basically the only time where it feels like this idea is fully realized. Similarly, the second type of two-world puzzle, the ones where Marianne and her DeviantArt original character Recolor are on the screen at the same time, also never really meet their full potential. One of the things you can do in these sections is trigger an out-of-body experience so that you are only controlling Marianne's spirit. Sometimes there will be areas that are blocked in the physical world, but open in the spirit world, and you need to do ghost stuff to get past them. But the only time this is ever really that interesting is one time where this generator is on a timer, so you spirit walk over to the switch to activate it, and then quickly jump back into your body to hit the lift button before the power goes out. Just looking at this particular puzzle solution, you can think of a million different ways this could have been utilized for clever level design or puzzle design, and it just sort of wasn't. Which is extremely odd considering that this is this game's flagship gimmick. You would think that the entire game's core design would revolve around things like this, but that just isn't the case. The majority of the game is sort of just standard lock and key progression, with a couple parts like this one where you can kind of fast forward and rewind to the spirit world by interacting with it in the physical world, which looks cool, but doesn't really offer any sort of interesting complexity. Now, I'm not implying that every game needs to have Cicada 3301 level puzzles in order to be good, or that every game needs to have mechanical complexity to be good. Just that it's very weird that this game's entire selling point was we are going to put two game worlds on the screen at the same time, and that wasn't really deeply explored. This almost gave me the feeling that I was really playing some kind of tech demo or proof of concept, rather than something that had been fully executed. And that theory is kind of backed up by the fact that Bloober Team has patented this two-world system. Patenting game mechanics and systems like this was kind of a hot topic recently after it was announced that the Nemesis system for Shadow of Mordor was finally patented after several failed attempts. And since it just happens to pop up in this script, I might as well take a second to complain about it. I'm pretty firmly in the camp that patenting specific game systems and mechanics is extremely dumb and only serves to massively hamstring creativity and progress in video game development. There are already plenty of laws on the books to stop people from stealing code or outright lifting entire IPs, so patenting specific mechanics like this is really just a desperate act of overreach to try and stop other people from competing with you fairly. Imagine if this idea existed in the 90s. Imagine if id would have patented the first-person shooter. Imagine if Nintendo would have patented pressing A to jump. Imagine if From Software would have patented the bonfire system. It's a bad practice, it hurts the industry, and I don't really have a lot of patience for it. The two-world system in the medium is also just an idea that doesn't really seem like it required some sort of stroke of genius to pull off. I can tell from the performance dips that I was getting during these sections that all that's happening here is there are literally two sets of assets being rendered on screen at the same time. All that we really needed to make that work was hardware that could handle it, so I'm not exactly sure what they're patenting here. So we've already kind of covered this game from a mechanical perspective, and like I said, it's pretty shallow. But the medium, like other similar games, will attempt to make up for it with its story and its visuals. Does it succeed in doing this? Sometimes. Let's get into the game's visuals and art style. Obviously, the game looks good. This isn't going to net you very many points with me. These days, every game looks good. What I'm more interested in are things like actual art styles and character designs and that kind of thing, which the medium does pretty well most of the time. I like Marianne's physical design and her ghost design. She just looks kind of cool. I think I'm going to start wearing one fingerless glove. If anyone would like to go half in with me, on a pair of fingerless gloves so we can split the price and wear one each, please comment below. This is serious offers only. I'm also going to be wearing black denim cargo pants and Ed Hardy t-shirts. This is an original style that I have come up with on my own that has not been influenced by anyone.
I don't feel good right now at all.
I also really liked this game's concept for the ghosts. They do this cool thing where a person's ghost is wearing this expressionless mask of what their face looked like when they were alive, and it's just really cool looking. I like ghosts with masks. I made some in Blender once. Kind of reminds me of the Kodama from Princess Mononoke or something. Sometimes you have to set a ghost free by finding its mask, which is a cool idea that probably could have been used more. I wonder how much it would cost to get a plaster cast of my own face. The spirit world in general also looks pretty fucking cool. Team Bloober is based in Poland, and it looks like their concepts for the spirit world were heavily influenced by Zdzisław Beksiński, a famous Polish artist that painted all kinds of weird hellscapes and characters. At this point, I'm probably throwing up some comparisons on screen or something. You should be able to figure out the similarities. Really, I just wanted to spend more time in this world than in the real world. Fuck this split screen shit. Just let me do ghost stuff in Limbo for 100 hours. It's not all cool masks and Polish painters, though. One of the creative choices that drove me nuts was during cutscenes when they would show both worlds at the same time. Why do I need to have the world where the ghost is invisible on screen? Just center the camera on the characters. I get it. You are very proud of being able to put two things on the screen at once, but this looks silly. I guess I understand doing it one time to show the audience that Marianne is existing in two places at once, but I only really need to learn that lesson one time. But in general, I liked how this game looked. It has some unique ideas to sort of set apart its paranormal world from the several trillion other paranormal worlds in games. Now I'm going to get into the game's writing and story a little bit, and obviously this part is going to have some pretty huge spoilers in it, so when the big ones are coming, I'll let you know. On a general level, I loved this game's world building. Medium takes place in what I think is a combination of late Cold War Poland and early post-Soviet Poland. It's kind of hard to tell, but based on the context of the game's story, for most flashbacks we are talking like 70s, maybe the 80s, and the current time where Marianne is existing seems to be maybe around the 90s, early 2000s. I'm not sure, my Polish history isn't that great. The thing you need to know for the context of the story, though, is that there were still a lot of elderly people alive that survived World War II, and it seems like Poland was very recently a police state due to being a Soviet satellite.
Let me be frank. This case is problematic. My superiors want it to go away. I want it to go away. You can see how your statement complicates that? Comrade?
Yes, I understand.
Because of this game's relative proximity to both the Cold War period, which was absolutely bonkers, especially in terms of psychos at the CIA and the KGB spending millions on paranormal research, as well as World War II being semi-close in the timeline, which allows you to take advantage of the Nazis and all their wacky schemes, this game's plot is absolutely dripping with potential to get into all kinds of paranormal and government conspiracies. And it kind of does, although Marianne's personal journey takes a front seat. In terms of writing and pacing, the medium starts off pretty rough. The first act of this game, before all the characters and plot lines really start to show up, is boring as fuck, and I really had to struggle to get through it. After playing the first few hours of this game, I wasn't even sure if it was going to be worth a video. My guess is there are a lot of people that won't be finishing the game based on that alone. But once you get about halfway through the game or so, and the twists and turns start coming, and all the characters have been introduced, it gets pretty compelling. And some of the game's writing is amazingly subtle. For example, for the entire start of the game, Marianne talks to herself like a dumb video game protagonist.
I'm starting to get tired of your shit, Neva. You better be worth it.
At first glance, you think all of the classic hack gamer thoughts. Oh, who's she talking to? There's no one there. Haha, aren't video games funny? But then later, you get this exchange.
Kinda sounds like a spy name. Cutters. Bolt cutters. Or a movie star, like in a movie you don't use your real name for. Yeah. Spy name it is.
If you're paying attention, that sounds like she's having an actual conversation with herself. And it turns out she is. Marianne's material body and her spirit body are actually two different people that are sort of coexisting at the same time. This is foreshadowing for a later point in the story when this character shows up and the theory is confirmed on screen, and we also see that he has a much more antagonistic relationship with his spirit form.
Look who finally decided to let me out of my cage. And only when you need my help. Surprise. Surprise.
You know what? I'm not in the mood. Just tell me what you see.
The game never really flat out tells you this is how it works. It's just something that you pick up on from context clues, and a lot of the game's writing is like this. Another good example is during this section where you're exploring the memories of a man who was alive during the Holocaust, and while the game never explicitly says the Nazis came and killed his friend, the symbolism is pretty obvious. Alright, now I'm going to get into actual plot details, so if you want to skip the spoilers, go to here. The overarching plot of the medium is pretty well done once it actually starts moving. There are all kinds of spicy twists and turns and tentacle demons. The plot revolves around Marianne, who is getting over the death of her father figure, and gets a mysterious phone call from a guy named Thomas telling her to head out to a spooky abandoned hotel resort called Neva, where some sort of grisly murders took place. Once we get out to the abandoned murder hotel, we meet this ghost named Sadness. Now, at first you think that this game is going to be all about figuring out the massacre, or solving the crime, or help Sadness move on, or maybe that Sadness is the reason for the massacre, and this is all some kind of a scam, and then a demon shows up, and you're like, okay, I've got this figured out. The demon killed everyone or whatever. Easy money, wrap up the script. But things start to get a little bit more complicated as time goes on. You start hearing about a guy named Richard, who seems important.
Find! Richard!
Eventually a huge twist is revealed, where you find out that Richard was actually friends with Thomas, the guy who called you, and Sadness is the ghost of a girl that was being abused by Richard, and then you switch from playing as Marianne to playing as Thomas, who's also a powerful medium that can enter people's minds and basically delete their soul from their body. This is the point where you learn about how the game handles the abstract concept of psychological trauma. When Thomas goes into people's minds, there is a child spirit that stands in for who the person was before they were traumatized. And there is also a demon or some kind of monster that is keeping the child prisoner. It's a big video game metaphor about people being controlled or imprisoned by the trauma in their lives. In this particular example, Richard is implied to have become some sort of child abuser after living a violent an abusive childhood where his 13-year-old girlfriend was killed by Nazis, which basically causes him to try and relive his lost childhood by being a pedophile. The problem is, Thomas can only delete the child, not the demons themselves, which leaves people in a vegetative state afterwards. So his powers are less the heartwarming ability to help people get rid of their inner demons, and more psychic Frank Castle. The other issue is that these inner demons are still able to run around in the spirit world, even if they don't have a host, so we get situations like this one, where the giant pedophile octopus demon that was essentially controlling Richard is just around, which is usually not the ideal scenario. Luckily, Marianne is able to banish the demons. This is kind of supposed to be the duality between Thomas and Marianne. Thomas can go in and recklessly disable bad people doing bad things, but he isn't actually attacking the real issue, while Marianne is.
Then give it to me, please. To not exist, that's all I want.
So be it.
Do you think she'll ever forgive me? Will you?
I am not your judge. I'm just the ferryman. Be gone. Richard.
This entire section asks a lot of uncomfortable questions that I'm sure a lot of people are going to get very hot around the collar about. We know, somewhat scientifically, that way more often than not, if an individual has some sort of maladaptive trait, like being a pedophile, they almost always have severe past traumas. So the question becomes, how responsible are they for their actions? Which can then be expanded into asking, how responsible is anyone for their actions? What should we do with these people? Send them to prison? Send them to mental hospitals? Meat grinder? This kind of ends up being the game's major underlying theme. After the Richard reveal and the hentai squid saga, Marianne continues trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. And at this point, it's clear that the Neva massacre was a red herring, and the real story is a little bit deeper. Eventually, we find out that Thomas was hiding his two psychic daughters in a house out in the woods because at one point he was captured by the Nazis who were trying to study his psychic powers, so he's trying to keep his daughters safe from suffering a similar fate. Then, another guy, Henry, who at one point was an operative of the Polish equivalent of the CIA, eventually tracks down Thomas and starts torturing him for information on psychic stuff. Henry sets Thomas's house on fire with his daughters inside to try and provoke a reaction, and Thomas goes into Henry's brain to shank his child self when this happens.
That's right, kid. Just come to me. I'll put an end to it. I'll set you free.
No, it won't let us leave. The monster, it's...
Don't worry about the monster, kid. I'll deal with it. I'll put it down for good.
Not if it puts you down first.
What did you say? What the hell are you?
What is that?
What were you hoping to find here? A guilty conscience? A vulnerable child behind the monster? There is no child. There is only...
This can be read in a couple of different ways. The first being that Henry isn't a maniac because of some kind of trauma, but because he's just built different. This is the classic nature versus nurture argument. Richard was a monster because of his environment, while Henry is a monster because his brain is shaped wrong. In real life, nature versus nurture is, of course, a false dichotomy. Both of them are working at the same time to shape someone's personality, but storytelling is about archetypes. Henry and Richard are archetypal opposites in the way that they're written. The second way you can look at it is that Henry is too far gone and too controlled by his trauma to save, which I'm sure will rub a lot of people the wrong way. But there is historic and scientific evidence that seems to suggest that a very, very small percentage of the population seems to have extremely severe antisocial personality disorders that have advanced to the point of being difficult or impossible to effectively treat. If you want a good example of a real-life person who might fall into that category, do some research on Richard Kuklinski. Really, you could probably pull the name of any serial killer out of a hat, and they would fit this description. Then, of course, we have to ask the question once again, as a society, what do we do with people like Henry? You'll notice that when it comes to questions of how responsible are we for our actions, and is it nature or nurture, or should we shoot Henry out into space, the game doesn't really attempt to answer them. It just gives you the information to sit and think about it. It doesn't try to explain the nature of humanity or explain why humans do terrible shit. It just gives you some bad guys doing bad things and then asks you to decide why on your own. This game's script isn't here to hold your hand and tell you that the bad men will go away. It's here to make you think about things that aren't fun to think about. And when you're in the mood for that, that's good writing. Eventually, the final twist is Thomas turns out to be Marianne's biologic father, and the demon that has been following you for the entire game turns out to be Marianne's sister's inner demon projected out into reality. When the house was burning down, Marianne's sister, Lillian, basically makes an archetypal deal with the devil to get Marianne out of the house alive.
Remember, Mommy? It's all her fault.
No, no, no! She's my sister!
Then set me free, and I will save you both.
Now Lillian's own personal Satan can walk around possessing people, which is how the Neva massacre happened. Finally, Lillian, who is still alive, asks Marianne to kill her to stop the demon.
Please, don't make me do this. It's the only way to destroy it. To prevent further bloodshed.
Lily? There is another way.
Marianne. No.
What is she doing? Nothing!
Like you said, I'm your only chance. Aren't I? You need me. A medium strong enough to sustain you. The others? They only lasted for so long before you broke them down.
Only you can end this.
You can't always save the butterfly.
The screen cutting to black here follows the same motif earlier about not answering questions. Is it better for Marianne to kill herself or kill her sister? Which one does she pick? It's not the story's job to answer all this stuff, it's the story's job to have a debate with itself while you pick a side. Are we responsible for our actions? Is it nature? Is it nurture? Is Marianne hotter with black hair or white hair? Today, the gamers decide. Alright, the spoilers are over. Basically, while the first half or so of the game is paced poorly, and while the game is just kind of generally boring, the story and world building are fun. I kind of just wished I was watching a movie the entire time playing it. All of the wacky twists and turns and difficult philosophical questions would have been a lot more fun to experience if I wasn't being bored to death looking for keys and rotating phones. I'm imagining this game's film adaptation being made by the guys that did Insidious. You remember that scene in Insidious 2 where the medium puts on the gas mask? That scene ruled. So that's the medium. If I was going to condense this entire video into one sentence, it would be that the medium is a somewhat boring tech demo with a well-written story. There is a post-credit scene that implies a sequel, and I hope if there is a sequel, it gets a little bit more engaging on a gameplay level than this one was. I also hope it goes deeper into the government conspiracy angle, because I need some more X-Files type shit in my video games. If you want to see more videos like this one, consider subscribing. Leaving a like and a comment also help out. Down in the description, I also have a link to my active Discord community, which you should check out. And you should also follow me on Twitter so you don't miss any important updates. Finally, I have been having some trouble with subscribers not getting notifications for my uploads, which is unfortunately the name of the game now on YouTube. Try to turn on notifications for my channel, and from now on expect that I'm probably going to announce all of my uploads with community posts just to cover all my bases. If you're one of the people that hasn't been getting notifications lately, maybe check out my video backlog because you might have missed a couple. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.